Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Chris Ely. I am the Research Director at GBTA, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining this webinar. To discuss a research study that we, GBTA, conducted in partnership with Uber for Business. It is the study is called The Current State of Business Travel, and it looks at business traveler and travel manager priorities. Again, I want to thank Uber for Business for its partnership and its sponsorship of this study. I think we've got some really great information to share today. And so thank you very much to Uber. As I mentioned, I'm Chris Ely, Research Director at GBTA. I'm joined by my colleague from Uber for Business, Vanessa. Vanessa, would you like to say hello?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Chris, and hi, everyone. Wonderful to have you all with us today. My name is Vanessa Snow. I'm a manager on the Global Strategic Partnerships team at Uber for Business. I've been with Uber actually since 2016 as a founding member of this team. And my team collaborates with some of Uber for Business's largest strategic partners. If you're not familiar with Uber for Business, it enables employees to effortlessly leverage the Uber they love and trust in their professional lives. And we've expanded to meet the needs of businesses across diverse verticals like healthcare, auto dealerships, hospitality, and we're built on one of the largest mobility networks on the world. So we're really excited to dive into the study with you today, Chris, and looking forward to it.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you. All right, so we're going to go and start we're going to give a quick overview of the actual study. And it looks at four areas. We're going to look at employee experience. So we're going to dive into the study explores what business travelers they think about business travel. And then we also look at it from the perspective of travel managers. How do they prioritize certain components of their program, like cost savings and employee experience in this backdrop that we have right now in the current economic climate that we're approaching or looking at. We also look at cost savings. So looking at the cost savings in light of, because of those headwinds that could be around the corner or in some parts of the world might be around the world already here. How does that impact business travel? We're going to take a look at also sustainability. How do issues around sustainability and carbon emissions resonate with travelers and managers alike? We're going to look at also, are there things that travelers would be willing to do to help sacrifice to travel more sustainably? And we're also going to look at some of the current travel program components, like including RFPs, meal per diems, and rates for per diems, meals, and rideshare. So there's a lot of information in this study. The study is available it's published on the GBTA website and in the hub for member access. That I'd encourage everyone to get a copy of it as well, which is available on our website. So let's just have a quick word about the methodology. This was a study of US and Canadian travel managers and business travelers, so only among North American travelers and travel managers. We fielded back in May, and we have a response rate. You can see here the different response rates from travel managers and also business travelers. So we have a really strong representation, I think, here of a sample of both those perspectives. So we're going to start by looking at some areas around employee experience, and we're going to start with a poll. Vanessa, if you want to share?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So the first poll question is, and everyone on this call can actually weigh in on what they think is the most difficult aspect of business travel for you personally. I'm imagining most folks on this call are travel managers, but maybe there are a few, road warriors in here. Is it A, the stress of navigating airports and possible flight disruptions? Is it B, eating healthy? Or C, stress of being away from family? And you should see a poll pop up on your screen. I see it on mine. And if you want to go ahead and just take a minute to check the box that you think is the most accurate.
A few more responses trickling in here. Okay. All right.
Great. So according to our study, 60% of North American business travelers said C, being away from family.
Wonderful. Great. All right, so let's take a dive into this component. And you're going to see here on each slide that I present, just for reference, you'll see an orange bar at the top. That means indicates the business traveler. This data is coming from the business traveler survey. If it's blue, it's going to be coming from the perspective of travel managers. So we asked business travelers, kind of a fundamental question, which is how important is business travel for them to meet their objectives? And we find that almost 9 in 10 say it's either essential or it helps business travelers achieve their objectives and that they need it. So that's important to think, even in this day of as we're climbing out of the pandemic and COVID. We're finding that still that business travel is important for travelers to meet their objectives. We would say oftentimes at GBTA, nothing can beat a face-to-face meeting. And I think that we see this here in the data. It's reflected here in the data that business travelers agree that meetings are often best face to face, given the different types of meetings that one might have. And so, but also looking at this is going back to the poll, which we found, which we just asked about, what are some of the traveling components of traveling for work? And we see here that it's certainly being away from family, and children, and also the stress of being away from the airport on time or any other travel disruptions or cancellations. We also see there's some challenges around maybe healthy eating habits, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit later. But there are a host of components that really make business travel can be a little challenging for business travelers. And another area we looked at is just some of the experiences and what can companies do to offer their travelers. And so to help maybe alleviate some of those concerns or some of those stressors. And we find that, business travelers are open to a host of things their company could do, including paying for premium experiences like, upgrading flights or lounge access. And then also other areas around like maybe giving additional time off for frequent travelers, and also booking airlines and hotels so that the employee can collect status points and rewards. But overall, there's a host of different activities, the things that companies can do. Vanessa, I don't know if you have any thoughts around this data and what jumps out at you.
Absolutely, Chris. I mean, before Uber for Business, I was a road warrior at a consulting company. So this business traveler perspective really hits home with me. There's a cost to personally, right? Being away and going on a business trip, you're away from family and friends, you're outside of your routine. So I think it was really interesting to see this study float to the top, the idea that premium experiences are important. And it's something employees actually could travel managers could use to make employees more excited about the business travel. Yes, it is part of their role. It is something that they'll need to do for the business. But can we layer in something that helps reduce that feeling of cost associated with, being away from family and friends? And so what we find is that those premium experiences just need to be elevated and something that maybe the person doesn't do in their normal day-to-day life, like take a comfort electric vehicle. We have something at Uber for Business called Business Comfort, which has just slightly a premium to the Uber X, but has highly rated drivers, nicer cars, and then you don't even have to have a more costly experience. In fact, there are ways then to layer in premium, maybe memberships that a company can get in bulk discount. At Uber, there's something called Uber One, which employees can use for benefits like free delivery for Uber meals and discounts on Uber meals. So they could have Uber One with their business and the business could save, but also they carry that perk into their daily lives. So this is a really interesting slide where you can see the premium experiences as well as additional time off, which is no cost to the employer, right? Potentially loyalty and status provisions, which employers can get in bulk. Really interesting to see how that compares to your next slide, Chris, which is the business.
The business, yes, exactly. So we asked also from the looking, but from the travelers, the travel manager's perspective, and one thing looking asked about things that they do provide or would consider providing. You see, some things perk up at the top. So later start dates for jet lag reasons or help alleviate jet lag. Again, allowing employees to book hotels and airlines so they can collect those points that are important to a lot of travelers, or maybe stay an additional night or overnight after work. So there is a host of things that companies do provide or would consider providing, but then there are some things that you see that they're really not. So down below we see like things like paying for leisure experiences, or reimbursing for things like childcare, or less common. But yeah, so what jumps out at you, Vanessa, when you see this from the travel manager's perspective?
I think that the travel manager is continuously cost conscious when it comes to all aspects of the role. So whether it's trying to get ahead and reduce costs from the front end, so putting in policies in place, having policies that share best practices when an employee is on the road, there's this continued sense of cost and the idea that we need to look for these elevated experiences to make sure our travelers and employees are happy. But at the same time, we have to be conscious of costs. So it's a hard role the travel manager has, and that's why I think the creativity around, you see premium permit late starts to alleviate jet lag, things like that, which is not a huge cost to the business, but can really go a long way with an employee.
Great. Another thing we looked at is just back to from the traveler's experience and perspective, is looking at, do they have meal per diems or allowances for meals? And we find that most business travelers say yes, that their company, 3 and 4 say their company does have some sort of a meal per diem, or some sort of a daily allotment that they can spend on for meals. And they're largely satisfied with these. So most business travelers, if their company does have some daily meal per diems, they feel that it's sufficient enough. It's enough to pay for satisfying meals, but also healthy meals as well. So that's really, really good news story there. We can see that, again, employees are largely satisfied with their meal per diems. Another thing we also hear a lot of talk about, and it's going on, is the expression bleisure, which I think everyone on this call is familiar with. But looking at, how many employees say that they actually have taken an extra day or days, some time off for personal PTO? And we find about half, 47%, of travelers said that they have taken, some form of a PTO day or days in 2022 or 2023 on a business trip. And interestingly enough, we find that most travelers will stay in the same hotel. So 80% of those who say that they did take some extra time off did end up staying in the same hotel that they stayed at for their work trip. So let's now just jump into looking at cost savings and managed travel programs. And we have another poll question. So Vanessa, you want to take that?
Yes, the poll is, what would your company likely focus on if it had to cut business travel spending? Would it be A, tighten trip approval process, B, reduce operational spending, or C, focus on more policy enforcement?
All right.
We'll give everyone on the call a few seconds, I guess, to choose what they think.
What we're looking at here, it looks like.
And so according to the study, 68% of North American travel managers said C, their company would focus on policy enforcement. And what about our pollers, Chris? Did we get it? There we go. Okay.
Yep.
Tighten trip approval process, hit 48%, right behind focus more on policy enforcement. Yep. Awesome. And then 23 said reduce operational spending.
Awesome. Great. Super. So thinking about the economics, and I mentioned this early in my opening remarks, that there is some concern about a possible recession and what that could mean for business travel. And we find that almost about 3 and 4, 75% of travel managers, North American travel managers, say that they are concerned about an economic recession or a possible economic recession. And about 1 in 4 say they're actually very concerned about a recession. Now, certainly, we haven't reached that point yet. I did hear an economist recently who made the joke, it's like we're always 1 month away from a recession. So next month, we're not in recession, we'll still be 1 month away. So, all right. But despite that, we find that travel managers expect business travel spend will still be higher this year. So they're concerned about a recession, but they still expect business travel to be higher this year than it was last year, with 86%, almost 9 in 10, saying that it's going to be higher. Very few say it's going to be lower or even somewhat lower than it was last year. Okay. All right. So what would some of the perspectives be? I mean, when we ask business travel managers, how would their company approach this? If there wasn't a recession and they had to cut back on spending, what would they do? And about a third say they would probably their company would likely expect employees to travel less often, but allow them to spend about the same amount per trip. About a third say that. Very few say that they would expect, the employees to travel the same, but expect them to spend less money. Most, almost half, say they would take a 50-50 approach that would expect employees to sort of travel less often and expect them to spend less per trip. Vanessa, does anything jump out at you when you see these results? Or what
It
jumps out?
really does. It's the idea that, our travel managers do have a role to play. They know that the cost cuts are something that the business as part of the business, they need to focus on and they need to work towards. But it's also true that there's this accountability that is placed on employees, and an understanding that the employees themselves have to make the right choices. And what we're going to do as a business is share what choices are offered by the business. So that could be working with vendors who are sustainable, working with vendors who have options across all kind of verticals as far as cost when it comes to maybe e-mobility. When you're looking at ground transportation, can we use bikes and scooters for like the lowest cost? Or at Uber, we have something called Uber Share, which allows people to pool together. Now that we're outside of the world of COVID, knock on wood, people are okay to jump in the same car together if they're going to the same location. It saves money, it's better for the environment. But then also the ability to choose maybe luxury vehicles that are EVs or that are correct for that specific business case. So giving employees this range of choices is helpful because it allows the business to really dial into the role that that employee needs to play. But the flip side is they're also looking for cost-conscious choices too. So that is interesting, especially when we head over to the next slide as well, Chris, which is, yeah.
Here we go. Yeah. So we see that what are some things that what are some cost containment measures companies would consider? Leading the top is devoting more attention to policy enforcement, but there are still a host of other areas that companies would consider to help reduce travel costs. So, Vanessa, what when you're looking at this from the actual actions that travel managers say their company would likely do or would take, what jumps out to you?
I think it speaks to the point that, we can tell people what to do and we can suggest what they should do. But there typically needs to be some enforcement around that. And so the nice thing is that enforcement can take place both on the front end or on the back end. So with technology, with many of these travel tools that are available today, you can set rules and restrictions up front for, say, maybe a certain group of people, or maybe for everyone at the company when it comes to you can only use economy vehicles versus this group has the ability to choose economy and luxury. So maybe enforcement on the front end using rules and restrictions, or a booking tool that only populates, certain hotels under a certain price point, as well as the end at the other side of the fulcrum. Once, if you were to give employees choice, is there this audit? Do you have data that shows the choices they made? And then are there mechanisms for follow-ups, automated emails, maybe monthly reports that managers get? So the tech has grown so much over the years. And I would say we also have grown slightly the roles. I feel like there's still a burden on travel managers to do so much, and the access to data can be overwhelming. But that's where we see these vendors or consultants come in to help with that management, and where policy enforcement can really help the business and drive costs forward, as the slide shows.
Great. So what about the actual, so we've heard some thoughts around what travel managers would do or they think their company would do, but what about travelers themselves? And we find here that travelers are open and they would be willing to make sacrifices or change their behavior if the company had to cut back on costs. So we find here that about more than almost 4 in 10 business travelers say that they would be willing to take the 50-50 approach, where the company asks for less travel, but then asks them also to spend less on the trip. About a third say that they would expect their company, they'd be willing to ask employees to travel less, but then allow them to continue to spend the same amount of money per trip. And then we see about 1 in 5 say that they'd be open for their company allows businesses them to travel the same, but then ask them less to spend money less per trip. So what jumps out at you, Vanessa, when you see this?
I think this is that the 50-50 approach that we saw travel managers want to take on the last slide is also mirrored here. So that's good to see, right? Business travelers and travel managers are kind of on the same page around what's most expected by the most number of people. We're going to share that role. I understand, I have an accountability, I am accountable to the team that I'm on and the company I work for to make the right choices when I'm traveling for business, both for costs. And again, I think we'll speak to this later, but the idea of sustainability is also top of mind for employees as well. And it's a shared role. This could also reflect especially on the West Coast, that kind of sense of choice. We're going to give our employees choice because we're trying to attract top talent. And we know everyone's different and has their own preferences. So we want to appear, to be giving employees the opportunity to choose what they want. But we also want to kind of taper those choices to make sure they can they're set up for success, both from the cost approach, as well as being safe and being on the road, and being really focused on the goal, which is their business role. And I also think that second tier, the 33%, that says, my company asks employees to travel less often, but allows them to continue to spend the same. I think this really popped up a bit, given that we found over the past couple of years how many teams and customer relationships can be built over Zoom, over video, over other collaboration tools. And while face-to-face time, nothing can replace that, there are other channels that people communicate through that didn't before, and now realize, okay, we can. When we were forced to be at home and work, we did it, and it turns out it worked. Yeah.
Great. Super. All right, so let's we're gonna now jump in and spend some time talking about sustainability and its role in travel programs. And so since it's a new section, we got a new poll question
Yeah. So, does your company track carbon emissions that are generated from business travel? And you should see the poll pop up. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Or I'm not sure.
Okay, let's see. So it's looking like almost 40-40, yes and no.
And
Approximately.
the answer from our study was yes, it was A.
So yeah, so we find yes that companies track carbon emissions, and thinking about the business travelers. I mean, it's interesting that business travelers, a majority of business travelers, say that they are concerned about sustainability issues. Over half of North American business travelers, in fact, say they're concerned about sustainability and the environment. Only less than 1 in 5, approximately 18%, say that they are not concerned. So I think that that's important as we notice as we move forward that this is something that's not just a company policy, but it's also speaking to addressing employee concerns about sustainability in the environment. Okay. All right. And then we also see, we wanted to ask about prioritizing not just the environment, but just looking at carbon emissions specifically. We find that almost 9 out of 10 North American business travelers, they do view carbon emissions reduction as a priority when they travel for work. Only about 14% say it's not at all a priority. So, certainly, Vanessa, what jumps out at you when you see these results?
Yeah, I mean, it is clearly a priority, sustainability. I think what this speaks to is the idea that we have other priorities as well. So, sustainability is a priority, it has competing priorities, and that's why we're seeing that pop up as 42.
Great. Absolutely. Okay. And then from the travel manager's perspective, it's interesting that 4 in 10 say that sustainability is one of many priorities that they manage, but very few say that it's a top priority for their program. But it is certainly a priority for most North American business travel programs, with about 1 in 5 you see below saying that it's not a priority at all. So Vanessa, when you think about this, when you see this data and thinking about it from the travel manager's perspective, in terms of where sustainability is as a priority for the program, what do you think? What are your thoughts around this?
Yes. Well, what we've heard from partners is sustainability is still a complex subject, meaning, they want to track carbon emissions. In the state of California, there's requirements that coming into play for reporting at, the ESG levels. There's reporting that's needed, but there's not always a one size fits all way to track and to report. It is something that has helped the idea of having a managed travel program so that companies can go from, allowing any employee to expense a ride or a trip or a meal with any supplier, anyone they choose to. Can we try to manage our travel so that we have more visibility and more ownership into what those choices are real time, so our reporting can be better and therefore the emissions reports can be more accurate. So sustainability, it is a value, mission, vision, and value of many companies. But I think this slide shows the complexity still that exists here. And as well as, I believe, this next slide too, Chris.
So when we looked at where it is as a priority compared to last year, 6 in 10 are saying that it's about the same priority, but we are seeing some growth with about 30, a third saying it is a higher priority than for their program compared to last year. And I think it's also worth noting that reminding that this is a study of among North American business travel managers. I think I speculate if we did ask the same question among European based business travel managers, this number would be very much higher in terms of being a higher priority.
Yeah, and I know that a few vendors too, or suppliers, I should say, like Uber for Business, we came out with a sustainability report in the dashboard. So when you do have managed travel, now if you're using Uber for Business, you can see near real-time carbon emissions reporting. And so I think that also speaks to the pressure that we've felt from our partners to help them get to a better place. So I do feel like this percentage will continue to rise over the years as travel managers get the tools they need to make sustainability more important, because it's easier then for them to measure and to drive results through.
And looking at what the business travelers, how they perceive their company's sustainability goals, we find on majority, 6 in 10 say that they believe that their company or their organization is committed to hitting sustainability goals, with only about 1 in 5 business travelers thinking that it might be more of sustainability goals could be more of like almost a greenwashing or PR exercise. So, but it goes to show that it's important. I think that business travelers, they're committed to sustainability and environmental, and they also truly believe that their company is as well.
And I think the way that travel managers continue to show this and allow employees to feel this is by those different channels that exist within the organization. So when employees see that, okay, their workplace services team has campaigns around, trash sorting, or the different, recycling options that are available, or composting, to travel managers, when you're on the road, we have green options for you. So real tangible. Uber Green has, the vehicles that aren't any more expensive than a normal Uber X. So if they're available, if the supply is there, choose one. And so the nice thing is that many of these options now, with meal delivery services as well, the consumer products that they use in their daily life. So with Uber Eats, we know over COVID, there were many families that were using meal delivery to help them stay at home and respect the rules. That's continued on into today when people are back out in the real world, but they're still ordering in potentially for hotel and as in lieu of hotel room service, because they want to try a local restaurant in the new town that they're in. The options with those delivery services to either opt out of the plastic utensils or make the right choices when it comes to maybe eating a vegan meal instead of, the burger. So whatever your choice that you want to kind of share with the world when it comes to sustainability, there are different ways to choose. And that is the nice thing with these products that employers now are using. It's kind of a similar product in that the consumers use in their daily life. So it fits that vision they share with sustainability. And that's what makes it real, that the organization is committed to hitting sustainability goals because they see those choices that they want to make in the business world.
Absolutely. All right. And this is picking up on that's a nice segue into what Vanessa had said earlier about when we were talking about information. And because we find that there's a need, business travelers, they could use more information on sustainable business travel practices. Less than half say they feel that they actually have enough information to travel in a more sustainable manner, but another half say would be helpful. So I think this clearly speaks to the fact there's opportunity out there for travel programs to communicate and convey the tips and about more sustainable travel. I think it also it pairs nicely with the fact that we saw in a couple of earlier slides how companies or travelers, I'm sorry, really largely trust and believe that their company is committed to sustainability. And so that would be a great way. So certainly providing more information on tips would certainly help. Vanessa, you have any thoughts around that as well?
I think this is just one of those spaces as a best practice. Travel managers can lean on the different parts of the organization, and that multi-channel messaging really helps when it comes to making business travelers more understanding of sustainable choices or sustainable options. And again, what we see is the meal delivery has really popped after COVID, and businesses are using meal delivery in their normal kind of at work life as well. So a manager may want to host a birthday lunch at the office instead of going out to a restaurant, which could be more expensive. And so they'll use Uber Eats or a different delivery service to bring the meal to the office, or maybe in a park, or a different option. And so that kind of multi-channel messaging, where there are different departments who may use the same tools that then business travels will use when they're on the road, and could make sustainable choices. So just that the ability of multi-channel messaging leaning onto different groups and different departments, like the workplace services team, like your health and benefits team, to bubble up those tools that employees can use when they're also on the road. So if they use them in the office, when they go and they travel for work, they just will already have that tool available to them. Holiday parties is actually potentially, we're coming into holiday season. I don't know if anyone on the call is gearing up for company parties, or if you're doing something smaller, or if you've gotten rid of them altogether. But that's another, we call it travel trigger. So someone who's never traveled before may need to get a ride home from a restaurant because, there's alcohol or there's something going on. So that would be an ability for you to surface, hey, Uber Green exists with your entire company, right? A sustainable option, choose Uber Green if it's available. And that way, some of those people, when they're on the road during their next business trip, they'll choose that sustainable option.
Absolutely. Great insights. And in that vein of communication, when we ask, so certainly we know that we've learned that many employees are looking for more information on sustainability. And we find here that most programs actually do not regularly communicate sustainability tips or proactively. So about 6 in 10 say they don't proactively communicate. But among those who do communicate, certainly that there's a mixed bag. It tends to be more ad hoc or as needed, not as much as a regular cadence in terms of quarterly or monthly newsletter or blog or an announcement in a company communications about that. So certainly there is a need. We know that there's a need. We know that also now that many programs actually do not do this very, very proactively. So Vanessa, what do you think in terms of the need for more proactive communication to help?
Yeah. I think this just goes back to, look, sustainability is important, but there are competing needs for communication within a workplace, right? And that's safety, it's cost savings, it's, you name it. So a travel manager can only communicate so much, right? And some workplaces, we can't even share an email. It has to be done through other channels, because companies will reserve emails for mainly work communications, for direct roles. So I would say, yeah, this definitely resonates what we're seeing, but it is something that has an opportunity for growth. And I think employees are excited to get that kind of communication, because again, it resonates with the kind of mission, vision, and value that they connect with in their private lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things also that goes with this theme about tracking and monitoring and communications, we find here that when we ask travel managers, most said they do track or at least estimate their emissions from employee business travel, but fewer managers feel that they have a pretty good idea about the program. So only about a quarter say that they feel that they have a good idea about their program's overall carbon footprint, but more say approximately that it's either a rough idea or they don't really know much about the track some emissions, but not necessarily about the overall carbon footprint. So a third say they do not track emissions from generated by business travel. I speculate maybe this might change if we ask the same question next year, or as it's becoming more and more of an issue for companies. We might see that no number go down because I think that it's important. We're seeing more pressures and needs in the industry for carbon emissions tracking.
Absolutely. I think as more suppliers come together and get on the same page around, okay, this is how we need to help our partners manage, their emissions. This is the technology. Again, Uber for Business has a sustainability report. So how can we make it really simple for the partners that we work with to get those reports and aggregate them with the other vendors or other suppliers that they work with. So the technology is starting to be there. And so how can now we get the right resources internally to leverage and make the most of that technology, and also make it consistent? So it's a big job, but I think we're getting there slowly.
But surely, right. So we found also looking at the travel managers, based on jumping off of what Vanessa said, I mean, in terms of like emissions targets, we know that many companies, they have carbon reduction targets, but not necessarily that target business travel. So we see here that about half of travel managers say that their company does have some emissions reduction target or goal, but only 1 in 5 say that they look at this from the perspective of one of the ways they look at their carbon reduction focuses specifically on business travel.
Yeah. And this is just, again, speaking to it's complex, but the sooner that you can start tracking emissions with ground travel, then the sooner that you're able to create that baseline so you can create goals and plans that will measure it over time and then show the good work that you've been doing, right? Because if you don't have that baseline, no matter how messy it is, it's hard then to make change, and then get recognition for the good things that you've done, and many companies are already doing. So I would just say, yeah, reach out to your suppliers if you haven't already. Ask about the reporting and tools that they have, and I think from there, we'll just keep building and sharing best practices and needs for better reporting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's certainly, when we look at it from the travel managers, we find that, their company, almost half say they're not, how they're actually trying to reduce carbon emissions and how they would do it. Almost half say that their company is not really meaningfully trying to reduce emissions that are generated by business travel, but there's some other approaches that they expect or they anticipate their company would take. And so about 1 in 5 say their company would probably take a little bit more of a cost-focused approach by cutting or requiring employees make some sacrifices in their business travel. About another 1 in 5 a little less, say that they expect their companies would achieve the majority through an investment approach by making investments into carbon reduction. And then again, back to that 50-50 theme, which we saw earlier. So many managers would expect that their program or their company would achieve carbon reductions or emission reductions by both making investments and also by requiring or encouraging employees to make some sacrifices in how they travel.
Yeah, I think one point here is unless you're really requiring a managed program, managed hotel program through Central Bill or managed air or managed ride share, meaning the company has a profile that employees would use to separate business from personal, rather than an employee booking on, say, personal and then expensing on the side. We've got to kind of manage the travel first, and then from there you can measure emissions. But it's really hard for a company to try to actively reduce emissions and measure emissions when you're trying to understand what part of this is personal and business. And that's what makes this managed travel program so helpful. So if you can require it, or going back to our earlier slides, if that policy enforcement is in place to really heavily encourage employees to use their managed travel options, that will help with this approach to, managing and slashing emissions over time.
Absolutely. And certainly from the traveler perspective, again, we see that sort of 50-50 approach rising to the top, but it's also equally split in terms of the 50-50 approach of reducing emissions by the company making some investments, but also asking for some other cuts made by employees. But about another equal percentage say that they expect the company should make investments to reduce carbon emissions, such as sustainable aviation fuel or spending on electric cars. Very fewer business travelers would expect that it should all be on them. So it's a partnership approach. Sorry about that. Partnership approach that employees are looking for. So let's move on to the next section that we've got here, and that's on current travel program components. And so we're going to start with another poll. So
yes, what are most frequently conducted business travel RFPs? Is it A, air, B, ground, C, hotel, or D, all of the above?
All right, let's see where we're going here. About 2/3 are saying hotel, looks like. Quarter, all of the above.
Well, according to our travel survey here, we saw C, hotel, surface to the top. In fact, 63% of travel managers say the company conducts RFPs for hotels most frequently. Absolutely. And let's see what our guests said, hotels as well. Wow, right on the money there, 64%, followed by all of the above.
Exactly. So, yeah. So we see that hotels are the most popular RFPs, and then also maybe for ground and air, slightly less. About a third, interestingly enough, said that none of the above, which I found kind of interesting. But we see that certainly hotel RFPs are the more common, more typical RFPs compared to some of the other verticals. Mm-hmm. And then also in terms of thinking about RFPs and the difficulty, we find that managers say that RFPs for air and hotel are more difficult to negotiate compared to those for ground. So about a quarter say that they think about ground RFPs are more difficult, but certainly the majority think that it's certainly air and hotel. Okay. So let's spend some time talking about this rideshare provider. And I think that, Vanessa, you want to talk about this, what you've seen in this?
Yes, I thought this was a great question when they asked what do the majority of business travelers use when they're traveling? Do they use rideshare when they're on business travel? So this is just rideshare in general. And what we found is that many of them said yes, occasionally. So 38% would use rideshare on business travel. 36% said they frequently use it, and then 26% said no. And I think this goes back to the idea that, we do see rideshare as a method of transportation that has really kicked off a long time ago, and it's caught up in the business world, recently, probably over the last 5 years. And it's now just a part of day-to-day business options. And it is something that people will use, especially if there's a need to show that they're trying to be cost conscious within a company. Okay. So if we go to the next, or do you have anything to add there, Chris?
No, I think that was great. That was super.
Yeah. So the next slide, again, the business traveler's perspective here. The takeaway here is that almost 6 in 10 business travelers who use rideshare providers on business travel have a profile with a rideshare provider. So what does that mean? That means that they have a managed travel program through rideshare. That would mean that if you're working with Uber, you have an Uber for Business profile in your Uber app, so you can separate your business trips from personal. It also means that your company is able to manage the rideshare and that they have near real-time reporting, both for where these travelers are traveling to give them an elevated duty of care, but also we were speaking about carbon emissions reporting earlier to track carbon emissions. And that company doesn't have to wait until an employee does their expenses to see, how much that costs. It's real-time reporting, near real-time reporting with this managed travel program. So the slide is showing that 58% of employees are actually, using it, which is pretty good, 60%. It also shows that there is definitely room to grow, or perhaps room to create more awareness around the profile that employees could be using. And then on the next slide, we look at the travel manager's perspective. So here, we see that over half, 54% of North American travel managers report their company has a business account with a rideshare provider. So it's actually not too far from what the employees were saying. But if you skip to the next slide, Chris, what I love is we're seeing that this percentage, 54, has grown from last year. So last year we did the same study, same question, and we learned that 49% of North American travel managers say that their company has a business account with a rideshare provider, and that has increased to 54. So again, still room to do some more managing of rideshare, meaning that there are companies out there, travel managers, who don't have that managed program yet with rideshare, but it is growing. And I think that reflects what we're seeing in the industry. The technology, that data, 7 years ago when we were talking about it, where we were offering it up to companies, everyone didn't really maybe want the data. It was it comes as a burden or a risk. But now, if you don't have that data, then we're not giving that duty of care element to our employees, and now it's pretty much table stakes in the industry. So that's an interesting one.
Absolutely. And finally.
Yes. So here we are with, again, the travel manager's perspective around the key benefits with a preferred rideshare provider. So why would we offer this? Why would we start working directly with an account manager or a rideshare team to layer in just one more tool that our travel manager team has to be accountable for? Well, number one was 70% said improved data reporting. And so this is just speaking to, I think, the theme that we're seeing is that now it's table stakes. The reporting exists, so we need to make the most of it. And actually, we're excited to start looking at it in more detail, and we know it's important. And the rest of these benefits, they actually kind of fall directly from better data and reporting. So some of the other benefits that were listed: improved risk management and duty of care. We can't give our employees a better duty of care unless we have good data and reporting around their travel. So that's something that managed profile or managed rideshare provides. We also, at Uber, there's a direct integration with International SOS and Concur Locate, which are those third-party duty of care providers. So that's, an even higher level that you can bring data and reporting into play with the third parties. You also see cost savings as a key benefit. That's, of course, one that will never go away. And we're, excited about the different options with ground transportation, everything from e-mobility to public transportation, to rideshare, to chauffeur services and luxury options, improved policy enforcement, and then other and none of the above.
Absolutely. All right. So with that, we're going to open it up for Q&A and questions. Please go ahead and type your questions in the chat. You'll receive a copy of this deck, but I just want to share that, so you feel free to email either Vanessa or myself at any time. You have our contact information there, and to reach out. So let's dive into, if we have a few more minutes for some questions. One of the questions, I'm just going to go ahead and start moderating some of this. One of the questions we asked that we have here is going back to that, looking at cost control, and maybe if there could be, you could spend some time talking a little bit more. The question is, how do you control the cost of business travel? So, any ideas from you, Vanessa?
Absolutely. So this is where we can look at it kind of from two sides. The first could be proactive cost mitigation. So how can we put rules and restrictions and policies in place on the front end that limit the employee's choice to the right choices? And that could vary by role, right? It could vary by job function. So that's where technology comes in. And it could be through booking tools. It could be through the supplier themselves. With Uber for Business, we have spend caps that you could put on a delivery service. You have spend caps you could put on a ride. You have geo restrictions that you can put in place. So that's the front side. And I would say when you do put in those rules and restrictions, you have to be dialed into the company and the roles and the job functions. But that's very effective, because then you're just stopping the problem before it even starts. The flip side is we see both in tech, but also consulting, especially when you're dealing with, PhDs and top talent, where you just want them to feel like they have choice, and their job function will vary, and they need to be able to make the choice themselves. Give them the choice, forget about restrictions, but then make sure that you have this managed program that tracks the choices that they make. And then we have different ways of doing audits and different third parties that will help with the audits. And after the fact, and a lot of this automation now with, I hate even saying AI because it's such a buzzword, but let's say it, it's been around for a while. Get the AI to, work for you and follow up with that choice. Hey, did you see that you took, this ride at this time? Was this correct? Or was this, an accidental personal use? So both on the front end, on the back end, we're seeing employers work on that and use technology to help reduce costs and make sure employees are making the right decisions.
Great, that was interesting, super helpful. Another question we have is surrounding meals, and there's been some talk about meals. We spent some time talking about meals, and the question is, just directly, should meals be included in a travel policy? So, what are you hearing from your clients and other stakeholders about meals and travel policy?
Yes, we find that they actually are, because you can't go on any business trip without eating. That's just a human need. So the idea now is, how do we make sure that, that is aligned with our business goals when employees are choosing what they're eating? And so again, technology has thrown in a few new options, whereas before, when you go on a client trip or you go on a business trip and you're getting together with clients or your own team, maybe for a summit, you're either going to go out to dinner or you're going to get catering to the office. Mm-hmm. Now with the meal delivery, you can bring a restaurant to the office, or I even mentioned it, we're seeing teams get really creative with using new spaces because maybe their workplace services team has dialed things in for cost savings, and there are more people working remote. So now I want to take my team to a park or to the beach, or, when we're getting together somewhere kind of creative and fun. And then we'll use delivery services, meal delivery service to bring the food to us. Or when employees are in a new location, we go back to the whole bleisure, the idea that bleisure's a way that a company can kind of elevate a business trip without necessarily spending more on that employee. So giving some room for bleisure, because again, the employee, if it's personal, the the leisure part of it would be a cost that they assume. But you're going to say, you know what, we understand leisure is something that you're going to do. We support it. And so with that, we know that employees want to experience the location that they're in. They may not want to have the hotel room service every single night. They want to go out and experience, what's the top sandwich that they found on TikTok. So that's where, again, these meal delivery services can bring the restaurants to them. They continue to do their job. They continue to have the rest that they need, but they're still getting to explore the community. So we're finding that that's a really great one.
Awesome. All right. I think we got time for one more question. And the question that we've received in the box is we've talked a lot about, business travel. So the question is, any suggestions or tips about how to improve business travel based on what you've seen and what you've heard, and maybe within more of also the grain of ground transportation. So any thoughts that you have, Vanessa, on just tips and things that can maybe help business travel, make it a better experience?
Absolutely. So at Uber for Business, we have 60% of Fortune 500 companies actually working with us today. That's a pretty big percentage. And so what they're doing right is that they've got a managed business travel program that gives them, the transparency of data, the duty of care, the access to 24/7 business support teams. So the travel manager team that's usually still, small but mighty, they can extend and essentially grow to thousands of people through, their suppliers' customer support channels. So I think that's where you take this idea of what can we do better when it comes to business travel. I would say you can leverage, your power as a company to work with the suppliers, whether it be Uber or Airbnb or hotels or airlines, to, connect into their networks and then multiply your voice by using their customer support teams, their account management teams, to better help your employees when they're on the road. And they can be that, other channel for you to help get you to cost savings and other sustainability goals that your team may have.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. That was really super insightful information. And I hope that all of our attendees on today's webinar got a lot of will take away a lot of great insights from the data and also from your perspective. So I want to thank you for joining us today and taking the time to share your perspective. I want to thank Uber for Business again for sponsoring this really helpful research. Again, it's all available on our member hub, so please, I encourage everyone to download it. You also will receive a copy of this presentation that we have, and it also has our contact information. So please feel free at any point to reach out to either Vanessa or myself. More than happy to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you again, and I want to thank everyone for attending today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you very much.